last time that we were learning, so started explaining how it could be that in the feminine there's actually more choice than there is in the masculine. It's usually associated confidence with the masculine and faith with the feminine. You can even remember it that way, that faith is feminine, F and F. So what we tried to explain was that there's a level of faith, meaning going above confidence, a level of confidence going above faith, where things are inevitable. That to be masculine in a certain sense is to be inevitable. Predetermined. And to be feminine is to be more malleable, more changeable, more able to change, to develop, to go through things.
Free choice.
And free will, right.
So there's a place where which is higher than which? So
there's usually the order is faith and confidence. Faith is in the crown and confidence is in the midos, in the measures. And therefore we say that faith is more like nothingness, the nothing, the ein, and confidence is more a feeling of yesh, of being. And so we wanted to say that confidence is more masculine. But there's a level of confidence where you're able to feel that what you are doing is inevitable. It's not up to you even.
Is it a good feeling?
Yeah.
It's a very powerful, it's very empowering. Because it removes from you the fear, it removes the fear of failing, of failure. Right?
Where does that fall on? Is it like confidence, faith, confidence?
Right.
And
exactly.
And what is that higher
so
confidence? So
that higher
called?
confidence, that's what Yosef tried to attain. But that's where Yosef had to go. Yosef needed to reach that type of confidence in order to be able to move his life forward.
Did we not study this confidence when we studied faith?
We
and
did.
confidence?
We already mentioned it once.
Just mentioned it.
But we mentioned it. We're
and it
going to
doesn't
say a
have
lot more
different
about
name. It doesn't have a
it.
different.
No, it's just called a higher confidence.
So this higher betachan is predetermined. It's
right. It's a feeling that things are predetermined. Okay, that's how it is when you ask things in terms of reality. But when you ask this psychologically, it's a little bit different. It's not exactly that I am inevitable. Because if I'm inevitable, you lose your ability to act. There's something not empowering about that. It's empowering in the sense that you don't have fear, maybe. But it takes away from your free will when you say that. And the point is that there's supposed to be more free will.
At this higher level?
Right. You're supposed to be able to do more, not less.
Where does free will fit into the sphere of?
We'll see in a second. But usually free will is to some extent, from confidence. That you have the freedom to act.
From Ratzon?
So, when we were looking at it last week, we said it came from Da'at. Right? The Da'at is the key that opens up the measures of the heart. That knowledge, consciousness is what opens up the measures of the heart. Except that there's a certain problem with that. Because like we said, if you have too much freedom, you also can't function. Meaning if everything would be free, and there would be nothing static, nothing permanent, nothing that you can count on as a foundation for what you're doing, then we would be lost also. Like imagine that we couldn't count on gravity, or we couldn't count on if everything, you need a certain level of determinism. You want to be able to count on yourself being consistent to some degree. Because if you're not consistent to some degree, then you've got a problem. So confidence, even though it's about being able to fulfill myself and about change and so on, there's a strong measure of constancy, a permanence to it. There's a certain measure of things staying the same for me to be able to take the next step. Because I don't know how to take the next step if I can't count on what already was to remain. I need things to be somewhat static.
External things.
Well, not just external. I'd also like to be able to trust my feelings. I'd like to be able to trust the direction I chose, that I'm still on the same track, that I'm not fooling myself every moment and just inventing a new path and not knowing where I'm going. Right? It's sort of like if you're trying to get from point A to point B in your car, and you can't trust the way you drive, the way you travel, then maybe you're going around in circles and you don't even know it. And maybe you're just not even getting from point A to point B. You don't even know really where you're going.
Trust cars can even work.
Well, that would be the external
That's like
things,
gravity.
but I'm talking about the internal things. If you don't have a sense of direction,
And that's predetermination.
and so that's a type of giving up my freedom. Because theoretically, maybe at every moment I should choose again, anew, whether I should be going left or right. And maybe every time I go from my house to work, I should find a new way. I can't do the same thing twice.
Just beat the traffic.
So you see, even Waze knows that you're supposed to pretty much follow the same route every time. And Waze itself is a measure, it's a way in which we give up our freedom to gain something. We do it willingly. So this is a big deal in our day-to-day lives, that we know that we can't have freedom in everything. We need to allow for some things to stay in other people's hands, let's call it. Okay? Somebody else has to take care of it. I can't take care of everything.
So what do we gain when we give up our freedom? What is the something?
We gain a lot of ability to advance, to move forward. And so we don't
Because
question
somebody else is
ourselves
all-
every moment. We don't go back to the first principles and question them at every moment. Because you can't go anywhere if you do that. You have to be willing to accept, we'll call it on faith, that these things are correct. And that, in that sense, that's the faith within confidence. It's the permanence, it's the predetermination within confidence.
And this higher bitachon, you're saying, is feminine, or
So now we'll see that
See, why this is
sometimes,
confusing? Yaffa was trying to convey.
sometimes you have to, so this is like what you mentioned before, that you hit rock bottom. Or what we've been calling that the line that you've been pursuing fails. Now the question becomes, so how do you restart a new line? We called it that there you need the greatest amount of confidence and so on. But really the beginning of the line, even though it's the greatest amount of confidence, it's not like confidence, because confidence is already when you're holding on to a certain direction and you want to pursue that direction. Here you have to have some kind of faith, actually, which in this case is called a higher confidence, but because it opens up a whole new system where you choose. I choose new things now. I have to choose a new line. And in order to choose that new line, I have to reach a state, we won't call it inevitability, because that would sort of be defeating the psychological purpose of this exercise. What you call it is that I'm stepping outside of myself entirely. Meaning, however I was defined before, I no longer define myself that way. What's the main thing, let's say, in a Jew's life? What does this mean? That this is a place that's above reward and punishment. It's above sin and schus, let's call it,
What's it?
where
Oh,
it doesn't matter here what I've done wrong. It's not the question, okay? I'll say it like this, that a lot of people, have some success, and then they suddenly fail. They might fail really terribly. So the first instinct is to say, what did I do wrong? And if you start getting into what did I do wrong, you develop what are called guilt feelings.
What?
You develop guilt feelings. Because just by saying, what did I do wrong, must mean that I'm guilty. And that is the quick route to completely destroying your life. Guilt feelings, we've talked about this a lot in Rectifying the Ego, that the ego uses guilt feelings
as a,
to get away from action, to get away from responsibility, to get away from moving and doing something. The ego likes guilt feelings. They're good for it. That's why we latch onto these really strongly. It's not to say that a person shouldn't have what we call cheshbon nefesh. A person has to have some amount of self-criticism. But that's not the same as guilt feelings. Because guilt feelings are a state of the psyche. They become a state of mind. They're not an action like self-criticism. Self-criticism is an action. You ask the question, what did I do wrong? You give an answer and you move on. But if you stay in that question of what did I do wrong and I can't find a good enough answer to explain my total catastrophe here, whatever didn't work, then you begin to stay in that state, which is, I must be guilty about something, and therefore this happened. And that's our need to understand how things work. That's our need for determinism. That's our need for some reasons, for some way of grasping what's going on around us. Again, because we want to continue extending the line. We want to continue pursuing what we've been doing so far. So if something stopped us, we want to know what stopped us so that we can continue. Theoretically, if we fix it, we'll be able to continue on our jolly path. But that doesn't happen, because sometimes when you hit rock bottom, when you hit a state where there is no answer, you have to know how to elevate above the answer, the question altogether. Not just the answer, the question. Understand that there's no answers to these questions.
What does that mean, to elevate above?
Your psyche has to go to a higher place. And the higher place says that whatever I did wrong, whatever I did right, is not relevant. So in a certain sense, you could call it inevitability, because it's like whatever Hashem wants is going to happen. It has nothing to do with whether you'll find a rhyme and reason for it. So in that sense, it's like going above all my speculations, all my thoughts, all my machinations, and so on. So it's like a state of very high faith.
das.
Is that where Avram went above the stars? Is that
Right,
where he
right.
was? That place of no.
That allowed him to start a new line altogether.
So, I have to give you a little bit of nachas. I don't know if this is correct or not, but I was working on something that fell apart last week, and I kind of I wasn't in guilt, I wasn't in right or wrong, I was just depressed. I was like down, and that's the way it was. And then all of a sudden, what comes into my head was, I have to start a new line. It was amazing. I just, that was it. I have to start just that line.
Just that line.
And it just brought me back higher than I was before. What's that?
So that's exactly the point. Except
It was wonderful.
Right.
It just came. And
because
it was
what
like,
is it saying? It's saying it's not relevant why this didn't work.
No.
It's not relevant that it didn't work. It's just not relevant. That's pushing it to a higher. It's a type of confidence, because to a certain extent, what you're doing is you're presenting it as if it's clear that I will do something. Like I'm confident I can still do something.
the kochot, the midot of it are amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to analyze it. Some combination of.
So
I
so
guess.
everybody faces these failures in life, and so if we call this sometimes Torah coaching, so the good coach tells you, look, you're overanalyzing it. It's not relevant. You have to go to a higher place. People invented this thing, which on the face of it, on a normal day is good, especially if you're analyzing somebody else. What did you do wrong? Like it's called a review process. We did something, a company does something, the product failed, whatever. They do a review process. What was wrong? The advertising, the product, what was going on? So that's great if it's not in your kishkas, if it's not about your feelings. You can do review processes about other people's work, about ideas in general. They're fine, and you can learn a lot. But the moment you try to do it too much about yourself, you end up pushing yourself into despair.
So you're saying it's not cause and effect, reward and punishment.
Right.
But how can someone safely say that it's not? How can you know?
That's why it's so hard for a Jew. For a Jew, this is the hardest thing. It's coming and saying, look, I'm not telling you there's no reward and punishment. I'm not telling you there's no averas and mitzvos. There are. But as far as you're doing, that's not the way to go about it. Meaning, the thing the Yetzer Hara wants the most from you is to wallow in your self-guilt. The thing it wants the most is for you to feel the burden of all your sins. I'm not saying there's no sins. There are sins. But it's not relevant.
Not relevant to your next choice?
Right. It's not relevant to your next choice. It's not relevant to your next path. It's not relevant. It's just not going to help you. You take care of averos at the end of the day or at the end of the year. You don't take care of them every moment. That's not how you can work. So if you're feeling the burden of your guilt every moment, that's a good sign that you need to elevate above this whole cycle that you're in. And because you shouldn't be feeling the burden of your guilt. There is burden. Of course there is. It's not like it's going to go away just because you elevate higher. But it shouldn't be affecting your actions.
Is it elevating to a place of free will or elevating to a place of accepting determinism?
Well, to a certain extent, you have to say, I accept a certain level of determinism in order to jump over this. Because you have to say it was sort of inevitable
That I was going to
It was
fail.
that I was going to fail.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. It's not entirely true. That doesn't remove the burden of the Avera, by the way. Because to remove the burden of the Avera altogether, you have to actually do tshuva. That's something else. But as Jews, we have it really stuck very strongly in us that every time we do an Avera, we should be very sad about it. And that sadness is not the right response. Because that sadness is guilt. That sadness is what prevents you from taking the next step. It's not that you don't have to do tshuva, you have to do tshuva.
I thought you were talking about a decision, like not you're talking about jumping over a sin or an avera. Because I was just gonna say when things get so crazy, this is what it sounds like the saying. There's this choice, this choice, this choice. You just could drive yourself insane because you.
That's another situation
And so
where
what
you
I
don't
do
have
with
any
words-
confidence.
Yeah. So the only way I could I did it a couple times. It was I stopped and I just emptied everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything. I
Right.
just became absolutely.
Exactly.
And I said, whatever's gonna come, because I have no clue. And it's amazing that I got an apartment because of that. I mean,
Okay.
and I'm not vote, but that was part of the process.
Right.
There
That
was
means
other
to have
things,
faith.
but
And
that's
it's
not
also a
Avera,
little bit
that's
like that because
it's
you're
Avera.
also saying whatever comes is fine. It's inevitable.
You have to because you completely can't. You have nothing. There's nothing left you can do. I mean, that's what I felt. Like it was only that. I think your class had said there's no straw to catch
we
on
need
to.
more
You
and
have
more.
to
We
go.
need more and more examples of this until we fine tune it. So now the way we get more and more examples is we look further into the Torah.
So we're talking about choice or Nevera now. I'm jumping over above this place because I did an Avera or because I just.
It could be because I did an Avera and it becomes a burden and I have to jump over it.
Okay.
Or like what you said is, I have confusion. Why do I have confusion? At the root of it, it's because of Averos, even though I might not
Before you
know.
came in, he was talking about if you fail at something, don't get stuck in.
But it's also why did I fail? Because there was also an Avera. It must have been something. It all goes back to that. But the question of continuing on requires me to get to a higher level where there's always a chance to start something new. To remove all these
Did you feel
burdens.
it's something, but it's not an Avera? Like it's
Yeah.
just you
Yeah,
misjudged?
yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Not the whole world is Averos and mitzvahs. There's also brachecha. There's also the regular things that people do.
Right.
Which is stupid.
Yeah.
And how does it fit together with Rav Yitzhak quoting the Ishvitzer, a Jew never sins?
That's another topic. When it's very close, it's saying that when we finally look at the whole picture, everything together, we'll see that all the actions that were taken were with the purpose of bringing Hashem into the world, except that some of them were done in the wrong time, or this or that, but the intent was all the same. And so there was never really somebody who did something that was completely unwanted. It just wasn't in the right time, wasn't in the right place. So, but you're right, that's sort of like an inevitability. It's a sort of feeling that there's something inevitable in how we act. But again, this, when you take it into the religious world, into the ethical world, you run into a lot of tricky questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to take it there because I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk only about faith and confidence in how a person acts and how they're able to. But of course, it has a lot of relevance to how to get over big averas that a person has. And everybody has something that they're carrying around. And you have to learn how to get out of that. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we said there were two people that ran away. They were Yaakov and Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though God had promised them, He had given them His trust, He had given them His confidence. Hiftichan, the Medrash said. Why did they run away? So our answer was that they were outside their element. That these were things that they didn't understand. They couldn't find a way. They didn't feel comfortable where they were. So they ran away. Now this is we said that this is a teaching for all of us. There are certain things that you naturally run away from that you really don't understand anything about them. But the problem here was that Hashem had told them, I want you to pursue this path. So they're running away not because this is not their destiny, they're running away because they're not ready yet. So then the question becomes, how do we train ourselves not to run away from something that really is part of what we need to do? That's the real question. Or in other words, it might be that it was also because of failure. We failed. I'll give you an example. Moshe Rabbeinu, he starts out by protecting a Jew, and that ends in utter failure because he has no influence anymore. Because it wasn't. How did he think it would play out? Well, he didn't really think. He did it.
He didn't think he'd get
He
caught.
did it spontaneously. But first of all, he didn't think he would get caught. And even if he got caught, who is he? He's
Son
the
of
prince.
Pharaoh,
He's son of Pharaoh. Was the result supposed to be that they would want to kill him? That he would be tried for murder and executed? So that didn't work out too well. And if he ever wanted to have any influence on Egypt and be able to free the Jewish people, that was gone. So that was a line that, pretty much stopped before it even started. You can say that was the beginning of the line. You needed a lot of confidence, a lot of overconfidence even to do what he did. But that even though it failed, it indicated that was his right direction. Except that it was too spontaneous. There's a lot a lot of things in life are like that. That the thing that you're drawn to, call it love at first sight, this is the thing that you're really drawn to, it fails completely, right away. So then the question becomes, so the fact that I spontaneously was drawn towards it, was that just a figment of my imagination? Did I make a mistake? And like, can't I trust anything anymore then? Or does it still mean something? So in Moshe Rabbeinu's case, it turns out, and that's the story we could say of the entire 4 books of the Torah after Bereshis, which will start in 2 weeks. In a week, in 6 days, we'll start Shmos. That you shouldn't give up on it, except it's going to require something. And that something is to be able to elevate higher than where your failure was. It's to go above even the faith that drove you in the beginning. It's even higher than the overconfidence that you had in the beginning. It's not to give up on these dreams. Because if this dream is real, and you'll give up on it, then you missed your whole life. So what happens to Moshe Rabbeinu? So he goes down to Midian, and he sees a vision in the burning bush. And Hashem calls out to him from the burning bush, and he says, "Here I am, Hineni." And God says to him, "Al tikrav halom." Don't come near. Halom literally means here. How much does halom equal? It equals 75. Hey is 5, lamed is 30, and mem is 40. That's 75 together. What other word that we've been talking about a lot?
Must be confidence.
Okay? You have good intuition. Bitachon is equal to 75. So al tikra valom is like telling him, don't come to confidence. Huh? But I thought he wanted him to come to confidence. Because what does he want him to do? What he started. You started by protecting the single Jew. I want you to protect the entire people. That is your calling in the world. So why does he tell him, don't come here, meaning don't come to confidence? What does Moshe lack? He lacks confidence. Because he's lost it, because, the first time he spontaneously acted upon his overconfidence was a disaster. It was a complete, utter failure. So the question is, how does he draw down a new line? But drawing down that new line, that's all confidence. So where's he going to get the confidence? Why is Hashem telling him, don't? No, Hashem says, no, it's not that simple. Don't come here, don't come to confidence until you do what? Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Until you remove your shoes from your feet. So that statement has become one of the staples of Yiddishkeit, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha, and for good reason, because it's equal to Bereshis. The first word of the Torah is equal Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. If you want to start something new, you have to be willing to take your shoes off. That's obviously a symbol for something. What is it a symbol for? It's a symbol for your body, and you have to take it off of your soul. In other words, you have to go back to being, as it were, a soul without a body and being reborn. What does it mean to have a soul without a body? That's how the soul was before it came down into the world. The part of the soul that comes down into the world is called a foot. It's actually called a foot, regel.
What part of the
And
soul
if you have
is
two,
that?
if you
That
have
is
2
the
feet, the whole soul, all of it, everything that comes down, that's expressed in this world is called a foot. When you have 2 feet, it's equal to skull, gulgolet. Gulgolet is regel. It's 2 feet. The gulgolet is the beginning of the crown. So from the crown down, the whole thing is called feet. And the body is called a shoe, na'al. To remove your shoe from your feet is to give birth to yourself again. Meaning, what I thought about myself, my entire identity, my body is like a symbol for my whole identity. It's not that you're supposed to die, chas v'shalom. But in a certain sense, it's like a new birth.
You can do this more than once, right?
And you can do this as many times
This
as
is
you
how you
need.
create a new line.
That's how you create a new line. That's what
Hashem
this is
says to
doing.
him, don't come here or come
He says,
here.
Al tikra valom,
Don't
don't come, but it's like don't come yet. Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Ki adama sherata omed alei adamat kodeshi. Because the earth that you're standing on is sacred. It's a sacred state. This is a sacred place in a person's life when they do this. It's to be reborn. What does it mean to be reborn? Here, we're starting a new line. I have a new image of myself. What happened to the old garments, to the old shoe? It's
Goes back
not
to
relevant. You left it there. In a certain sense, two stories that go along with this. One story
Somebody
is
can be reincarnated.
whoever reads the newsletter. I don't know who does.
Is it in English?
Anybody read the newsletter? Nobody read it.
Where is it in?
We send it out to 8,000 people.
Do I
Is
get
it on
What, the Abit?
We
No.
are inundated with stuff. Come on.
Yeah, so what? But this is a good.
Is it in the email?
Yes, the email. That's what we call
And
the newsletter.
Elkanai.
The Gal and I email every Friday just before Shabbos.
Oh,
2 minutes
right.
before Shabbos.
in England.
Yeah, because you're living in the wrong country. It's meant for people living in the other side of the world. I'm kidding. It's just late. So there was a story about the Baal Shem Tov. That one time he went to sleep and he put his shoes near him. And the servant came around to clean. And he wanted to move the shoes and clean under. But then it hit him like maybe if the Baal Shem Tov placed it here, I shouldn't move it. So he didn't move it and cleaned around. And when he finished cleaning, the Baal Shem Tov woke up and he said, "What happened to my shoes?" He says, "I didn't move them." He says, "Oh, for that I'll give you a blessing for long life." So many years later, somebody who knew this person when he was still by the Baal Shem Tov, so he came to visit him, and he comes into the house, and he sees. He thought he's supposed to be very, very old. So he sees a middle-aged man cleaning the floor and an old man sitting by the fire. And the middle-aged man yells at the old man, and they look very similar, so he figured they were father and son. So the son is yelling at the father. That's what he thought. He's yelling at him, telling him, "Why didn't you get off your ptuchas and do something?" So he said to him, "It's not proper. You shouldn't. He's an old man. You can't. And he's your father. You can't speak to him that way." So he says, "No. You have it all wrong. I'm the father. He's the son." So it turned out that servant looked middle-aged, when his son looked very old. That was the blessing from the Baal Shem Tov. He was still cleaning stuff. So what was that about? So what was the whole thing about? The explanation is that the shoes are your connection to this world. And the Baal Shem Tov, even when he was asleep, he still saw what was going on in this world. That was part of his gift. He wasn't like that initially. It took him many, many years to reach the state where this world mattered enough to him that even when he was asleep, when we go to sleep, it's to forget from the world. But he was such a, call it a leader, such a person who was involved in everything that people needed, that even when he was asleep, his shoes were his connection to reality. So if he would have moved it, he would have lost his connection to what was going on. So even when he was asleep, he was aware of what was going on. There's exactly like this in today's daf. So probably everybody in its mitzvah for women also started learning daf yomi. So in today's daf, there's a whole issue of how David slept. And David used to sleep, it says, like the sleep of a horse. Well, there's a machlokas if it's like a horse or not. But at most he slept for 60 breaths. There's a whole question whether it's human breath or a horse's breath. Horses breathe when they're asleep about once every minute. So 60 breaths is quite a long time. It's about an hour. There's some who say it's a breath every half minute. So then it's only 30 minutes. There's two different opinions about how long he slept. So that's how long that's in today's daf. This whole, not the whole machlokas. The whole machlokas is in other places, but it mentions it there. So the Baal Shem Tov, like even when he's asleep, his sleep is like a horse's sleep. It's only 30 minutes long. Why? Not to lose touch. That's how David was. David, Baal Shem Tov is a Gilgul. He's a reincarnation of King David. So in order to be connected to his people, connected to his kingdom, he has to be, even when he's asleep, he's still connected. He still has one eye open. He still sees what goes on. That's one story that's connected to this. The other story that's connected to this is what happens on, why do we dance so much on Simchas Torah? When does the year start? So we talked a little about this, I think, a few months ago when it was around that time. That the year in Yiddishkeit doesn't really start on Aleph Tishrei. When does the year start? On Simchas Torah. Yeah, remember this? Were we talking about this? That everything until Simchas Torah, until Shmini Atzeres, is really it's a prologue to the year. It's not, the year doesn't really start on Aleph Tishrei. Everything that we do is to prepare for the new year. And the new year, that's why we finish reading the Torah and we start reading it again on Simchas Torah, because that's when the new year really begins. And the whole thing with the first 3 weeks of Tishrei is like a prologue. This is just before. And we know this from different psukim in Chumash. It's not so important right now. But then what happens?
Yaakov goes on his way.
No, Yaakov goes on his way. That's the day after.
Oh, that's it.
But yes, but that's when you start a new line. Okay. So we talked. You remember this? Why do we dance so much? Because what are we trying to do? To wear out our shoes. There's a famous story that Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev once said, that every day when the angels come up to say praise before Hashem, so they can't say praise until we finish, until the souls finish. So what do they usually find in the chamber of prayers? They find tefillin, they find sidurim, they find what we davened with. But on Simchas Torah, what do they find? They find a bunch of torn shoes. So it says that's the one day of the year where you finish off your involvement with the world. Your soul finishes off. It's like a duty to finish off the shoes completely. You have to start something new. You have to have new shoes the day after Simchas Torah. Almost everybody has to. And even if you didn't, it doesn't matter because you're wearing them off. You're wearing them down. So that's in order so that you can start a new year. You can start something new, entirely new. Okay? So this is all related to what Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu. If you want to reach a state of confidence, then you have to take your shoes off. And then you'll come halom, which is here, which is equal to confidence, to bitachon. Who's the symbol for this, that this is all related to shoes and to walking? Avram. Because Avram, he starts like Moshe Rabbeinu. He's completely nullified before Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu, what is he? So he's minamayim mishitiu. He's from the previous reality, and he's nullified here. He doesn't have anything here. He's from a state of null.
So what's the difference between them?
We'll say in a second. He's Tohu also. He's considered to have come from Tohu, Moshe Rabbeinu. Avram also came from Tohu. But Avram's Tohu is a little bit different. Avram's Tohu is just the crown in general, which is called Tohu. What two letters do they have in common? That's the easiest way to do it. Keep the letters. Avram and Moshe, what are the two letters that they have in common?
Mem.
And
Hey.
and hey. Mem hey, what's that? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says, V'nachnu ma. We're nothing. He says about himself and Aaron, we're nothing. By the way, Moshe and Aaron, they're Netzach and Hod, they're the feet. But they're nothing. Meaning they don't have... if you take the Mem Hey out of Avram, what do you get? So he's called Eivar Ma. He's the organ of nothingness. The organ of nothingness is the mind, is the crown. It's really the skull that we said before. So Avraham, he also starts from that same spot. And how does Hashem bring him into the world? What does he tell him to do? What's his directive? Always. 2 words.
Here I
Lech
am.
lecha. What does that mean? Go. Why? For yourself. That if you walk enough, you'll be in the world. El haaretz asher are'eka, into the land so that I can show you, because you're too nullified. So Avram has to somehow enter into the world. How does he do this? He goes into Eretz Yisrael and starts walking. Where does he walk? V'Avraham haloch v'nasoa hanegba. He walks to the south. So whenever you have south, that's the right side. What's the right side? The right axis of the Sfirot. So he's coming down from Keter through Chochmah. He's the Eivar Ma. Ma is Chochmah. Chochmah is Koach Ma. It's the power of Ma. And then he goes down, he becomes Isha Chesed, all the way to when he reaches Negba, as far south as he can go, he becomes Netzach. And Moshe Rabbeinu goes through the same process. So Moshe starts even higher. He's V'nachnu Ma, he's like nothing at all. And then he has to travel, it's called Molich li min Moshe. There's a pasuk in Malachi. Malachi or Malachi. Walking to the right of Moshe. That's what it's called. And he has to walk. He has to walk through things in order to get to a state of confidence, into Netzach. Netzach is the act of confidence. So Hashem is basically taking Moshe through the route, through the actions that every person who wants to be a leader, and every person is a leader in his particular area, has to go through. So the first approximation that we do is, the first time we try, it's spontaneous, and it doesn't work so well. But that doesn't mean it's false. It's just that that's how things start, because they start from a place that's all tohu. That's not really meant for the world yet. And then you have to bring it down through the right side until you reach Netzach, until you reach a state
They
of
can't
confidence.
both be, wait, Moshe and Abraham can't both, they both come down the same way?
Except that Avram, in the end, he's Chesed. He's the inspiration
Right.
for Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe becomes Netzach. He becomes the Sphira after Chesed. Let's see how it is with the other letters. So by Avram we said he's Eivar Ma. He's the organ of nullification. That's the crown. So organ, Eivar, that's already something. That's not a state of nothingness. They're opposites, right? You're saying Eivar Ma. It's the organ of nothing. So you got to decide which one is it. So yes, he has the organ that allows for nullification, and he has to walk to reach down into being confident and be able to do something. Moshe Rabbeinu, what's his additional letter? Shin. What does the shin represent? So shin, there's many things. Usually it's fire, ish. But there's a word that's almost like fire, which the shin is also a lot of times. And that's what we learned, that kol ha'chaim yesh bitachon. That all life has confidence. Yesh, being something, is hiding in Moshe within the nothingness of the Ma. So Hashem, really what he's doing is he's saying, Moshe, it's very nice that you're Mem Hey, I want to show the Shin inside of you. There's a Shin hiding inside of you. There's a lot of Yesh. There's a lot of being inside of you. It just has to be revealed. How is it going to be revealed? Don't worry about what you did until now. You have to go above that. Take off your garments, take off your shoes, and you're going to start a new path now. And this new path is going to make you like Avram Asher Are'eka. This is how I'm going to show who you are. So this is the thing that's missing from a lot of people when they try to restart. That they try to fix what they did wrong. But you can't always fix what you did wrong. In fact, you can't always even know what you did wrong. So that's a state of a certain inevitability giving you more choice. Because you're sort of saying, what happened needed to happen. That was the ignition. That's how you turn the engine on. But you can't drive that way. So everything has to calm down. When you ignite the whole process of your life, when you start a new line, you have to be willing to say what was until now is gone.
You've said that once.
Okay.
Hmm.
It's gone. I have to build a whole new image. Who I was is not going to help me now. Or the way that Effie likes to say it is, don't live life backwards. It's really a deep way of saying this. Is that stop thinking about what you were because it's not relevant. Even if you're very successful, you shouldn't think about what you were. Why? Because to be very successful and just to want to continue the same success further is to lock yourself into a straitjacket. Because you can only build on what the previous success was. If you really want to bring something new down, so you have to do this as much as you can. Even if I'll decide to continue from the same point I left over. Even if I continue the same line, I should still be able every day, like we said, even small faith, which is just not the higher confidence here that's above faith, but even just regular faith, which is just to let go of all my doubts, all my machinations, all my thoughts, all the things that trouble me. But all the more so when you want to start a new line, you have to realize that the previous failure was really the beginning of the new line, and if you use it the right way. Because what it was meant to do was to force you to reset the whole system. And to reset, it's called taking your shoes off. In fact, what do shoes mean in Hebrew? They mean two things. They mean shoes, and they also mean locked. Yot na'ur. So if you're locked in your thought process, if you're locked on, you need to be like people say. He's like a missile locked on target. Like he's so focused on what he wants that he locks himself. But that's exactly where the problems start, because you're so locked on what you want to achieve that if you miss, you just explode and nothing happened. So you have to prevent that. You have to be agile enough to get rid of the lock, to take the shoes off. That's why, what is the third custom? There's already a custom that we do before a man gets married. How do you walk to the chuppah?
Everything untied.
No locks. You untie the shoes, no belt. Why? Because you have to start something new. It's a new. You're going into a new body, as it were. You can't continue with the. So this is like
Just the groom, not the bride?
I don't know.
she is the body.
The bride takes off all of her jewelry.
Well,
Okay, but
Oh, and I was thinking the circle and the line thing, the groom puts the ring on the
Mhm.
bride's finger.
there's also a switch.
yeah.
Because she's like the line.
Circle on the line.
Did somebody show me a ring that has a circle inside and a square on the outside?
That's what I'm doing.
That's, what is that?
That's the Kabbalistic thing. So, if we go into that a little bit, men always complain that their wives never forget anything wrong, anything they did wrong. Why is that? Because the body doesn't forget. The psyche can easily forget. So relatively speaking, the male is more spiritual and the female is more physical. But obviously it's not to say that that the woman is not spiritual. It just means that from the spiritual she takes the side that's more permanent. That's what we usually have. We say that the feminine is more determined, It's more predetermined. It's more static. It changes less. So, how is this explained in this thing that women remember everything that went wrong? That Chava was Adam's backside. What's the backside of our consciousness? That's our subconscious, our unconscious. So it's like all the memories, even though the memory is like something masculine, zikaron is something masculine, it goes into the feminine. So to say it another way, when Yosef said to the butler, "Remember me, and bring my memory before Paro," what was he doing? He was churning the butler into his subconscious. So of course he couldn't remember. It's subconscious. He couldn't, because if it was a woman, maybe she would have remembered. But when you do this to a man, it doesn't work. So when it comes to us, also this is how you free yourself from your subconscious. If everything that I went through was in order to start a new line, there was a purpose behind the failure, so the failure is no longer just something relegated to the past. It's something that has a purpose now. So I'm bringing it back into the foreground, and it has a purpose. So then it doesn't linger back in my past. So I'm not fueled by it. My life isn't determined by it anymore.
Could you explain that more? I don't understand what you're saying.
That the most free will that I need to exercise in order to move forward is relative to my subconscious. To wedge my subconscious free from where it's stuck, I need a lot more free will than with my conscious aspect. The things I have to worry about, the things that are going to sidetrack me, are the things coming from my subconscious. And I don't even realize that they're affecting me. If I want to change them, I have to do a lot more work than if I want to change my conscious thoughts.
What is the free
So what's
will
the
do?
work?
So, I'm saying you need more free will, you need more freedom, more choice to be able to change the backside.
How? How does it work? How can you use
You have to go all the way up where I'm like a new person altogether.
The new
How do
line,
you do
is
that?
that what you're saying?
Can-
That's how you...
Can.
Ah,
Right.
so it's almost mathematical, like you're not...
Right.
There you're...
So that's really why when the feminine rises, the subconscious rises, there's more freedom in the world. Because Hashem has to give more freedom now.
Why?
Because there's no other way to fix it. And usually, day to day, the feminine represents a more static state. And you're pushing it back, you're pushing it behind you all the time. Just your feminine side is like your long forgotten memories. They're static, they don't change. But now, this is all rising now, and it's saying this has to be fixed also. So to fix that, there has to be more freedom of choice. So that's why when the feminine rises, it's like rising from the subconscious, it's coming up. So there has to be a lot more freedom in order to be able to fix it, in order to be able to wedge it free from where it's stuck.
So that's Binyan Hamalchus,
Right.
the feminine
Right.
rising. And you have to we're putting aside subconscious doubts. Is it doubt that I can...
Yeah, it could be that the doubts that I can succeed and so on are in my subconscious.
So we're putting that, by rising up
Right,
to this higher
right,
top,
right,
we're
right,
putting that
right,
aside.
right. In that sense, the feminine has to go higher than the masculine, because the masculine can work even with less choice, but the feminine needs a lot more.
And what makes this free will feminine? What's the feminine part of it?
The feminine part is just that the feminine is rising, and that requires more free will. It's not that the free will is coming from the feminine. It's just saying that if what was was underground or was submerged is now rising, for that to be able to change, even just the fact that it's rising up is saying that Hashem is increasing the free will in the world. Because that's the only way to fix it. That's the only way to work with it. It's like if a person recalls his failures. It's a lot harder to, if I'm working with my conscious and where I am and moving forward, so it's easy to take another step. But when you fail, and then you have to bring back your failure, and you have to get over it, and so on, it requires a lot more energy, a lot more free will, that I can get over it.
How is our free will limited in relation to what it is like now?
Because now it's like we're only masculine. I'm only working with my conscious part. The moment that I start dealing with my self-conscious part, that's the difference between Torah Nigle and Torah Nista. Nigle only requires a certain amount of free will. But to work with the Nistal, to work with what was concealed, requires a lot more. So Hashem gives a lot more in this generation, a lot more free will. It also confuses people. But it was really meant to...
How does that look?
that there's a lot more choice.
I mean, it's
People are no longer, they don't feel obligated by the past. I mean, they don't feel obligated by rules, call it like that. Nothing can obligate me. I'm free. So then the question becomes, so what is it meant for? So a lot of times it's taken in the wrong direction. It's to doubt things that don't need to be doubted, or to free things that need to remain obligatory at some level. But the reason that it's here is because we have to deal with things that are much, much deeper. And those things, that's the Nistar is what gives freedom. Really, it all passes through the Torah of Nistar. Torah is always about Ben Cholim. It's always making you free. That's the purpose of Torah. That's how Hashem gives you the freedom of will in the first place. Except that in the Nigla of Torah, there's a certain amount of free will. And in the Nistar of Torah, there's a lot more. Why? Because the Nistar is going towards the aspects of humanity, of what it means to be a human being, the aspect of the soul that's hidden, it's concealed. It needs a lot more freedom and a lot more energy in order to elevate it, in order to free it, in order to use it, in order to function. Yeah.
I still can't quite get the connection of why for Binyan Hamalchus free will is what's necessary.
There's a pasuk in I want to say Mishlei, but I'm wrong. So I'll say Koheles, and that'll be super wrong. The pasuk is Ashraich Eretz shemalkech ben chorim. How do you say Ashraich?
Happy, lucky.
Good for you, the land whose king is a free man. It says that in order to build a kingdom, you have to have a lot of freedom. The king has to be free. Here it's chorim, it says, because it all starts from the chokhmah and the bina. It's a long Zohar, and it has a long explanation in Chassidus. What it's saying is you need a lot more freedom of thought to build a kingdom than for anything else. And the kingdom is the feminine. A lot more freedom is needed to build the kingdom than is needed to build the masculine. The melech, actually, it says in the way it's explained in Chassidus, the melech is the Zah, is the Tiferes. And he has to be the son of free men, two of them, Chorim. But it's not written Chorim with a nun, it says Chorim with a mem. Because it says his father has to influence his mother. What does the father give the mother? What does the Abba give the Ima? He gives her freedom also. Because the Ima is locked into nature, it's like a determined state. The Bina represents nature. And so the father, whose nullification he is able, that's what we talked about here, that he has to nullify it to such a high level, it's almost like there's no world, there's no nature. I can invent whatever nature I want. So he gives her that freedom. In simple terms, what that means is that when you come home and say it like this, if there are husbands that don't understand that the thing that they need to give their wives is freedom. not freedom from themselves. Because that's what every therapist is supposed to do. I'm supposed to free you from yourself. You're locked, you're stuck in your natural, call it habitual responses. And I have to free that for you. That it's not necessarily that you have to react this way. You can also react. Again, if you say to somebody, don't react this way, you didn't free them. All you did was make them feel bad about how they reacted. But if you talk about it with moichin, with chokhmah and bina, and you explain the whole process, the person slowly frees himself. He understands that there's, you don't even have to say that there's another way to react. The person figures it out for themselves. Don't get upset. That's not good. Because you don't get upset. What do you mean I'm getting upset? That's my reaction. But if you say, maybe there's another way to look at this. Well, let's think about it like this, like this, like this, like this. It has to be very, call it exploratory. You have to sort of explore the options. That's what freedom really means. There's many options. That's what the therapist gives to the client. You're giving them options. Of course, you have an idea about what the right option is. It can't be like a Western therapist where everything is okay. You have to have an idea of what the right direction is. But in order to get the person to even choose something, you have to free them up. There's other ways of looking at this. It's not, there's other things. There's other ways to react. Doesn't mean that how you reacted was wrong. Remember, there's other ways. So the mother is really upset at the children. So, okay, they deserved it. But there's some other things going on. Let's think about this, about that. And it frees you. It frees you from where you're constricted. So that's like freeing up the past. It's freeing you from your past. And allowing something new to develop the next time. Because in the end, why are we doing this? Because again, netzach and hod, they're habits. In the end, confidence is very constricted. Again, we started with this paradox last time. We said that even though confidence seems to be that I have a lot of free will, but really confidence is a state, it's not by mistake that it's in netzach and in hod, active confidence and passive confidence. It's there because these are habits. It becomes habitual, and then you get stuck in it. And so you think things have to be this way. You start a line, and it has to be this way. This has to end. Well, nobody said it has to. Nobody says it has to be successful. It could fail, and it's okay. Because why is it failing? Because you're too constricted. And you'll start again a new line, and maybe you'll even find yourself in the same place. Like Moshe Rabbeinu finds himself exactly where he started. Where did he start? In Egypt. Where does he end up? In Egypt. He came full circle. So the first time you did it wasn't so great. The second time, it's much better. The second time you already had confidence that you could do this. I mean, the first time was, I almost say it, that the first time is an immature reaction. When he killed the Egyptian, it was an immature, spontaneous reaction.
What was the choice?
He didn't have to do that.
Take him for, come. I have something for you to do.
For anger management.
I have something for you to do. You see that chariot over there? You stand there, I want to see how fast I can drive it. I don't know, he's a smart guy, he's figured something out. How to make him disappear. Trump made people disappear. There's ways of doing it.
We do that too.
It's not so smart, by the way, because everybody knows, but I guess he wanted to send a message. So, but usually when you want to get rid of people, you get rid of them. You don't say anything. You have to make a big deal out of it.
He did make a big deal. He didn't say anything.
He did.
He killed him. That's
He
what
was
he
in front of
did.
everybody.
He buried him in the sand. It wasn't in front of anyone.
After the fact, well, you're getting rid of the evidence.
Only the two guys saw. I thought only Dustin and his parents.
Oh, emotion.
Again,
Why bother hiding him in
you
the
make it
sand?
look like an accident.
I'll make it.
That's what I mean. You don't.
Chariot ran
Yeah,
over.
it's I'm sorry. Okay, accidents happen. What can I do? But that's the mature reaction. Like mature in the sense that I have enough confidence I can carry this through. His initial reaction was correct, but it was done the wrong way. And he had to free himself, but he gave up on it because it was such a bad reaction for him. Maybe it was good for the Jew that he saved, but it was a bad reaction for him, and really moved him far away from his real goal, which was to free the people, that he gave up on it. So Hashem says, yeah, don't give up on it. I want to teach you confidence. But to teach you confidence, first you have to remove your shoes. You have to get out of this whole picture of who Moshe Rabbeinu is. You're no longer the Egyptian. It's very clear also. Because when he came to Midian, what did they say? Ish Mitzri Tzilanu. They said an Egyptian man saved us. He says, you're no longer an Egyptian. The old Moshe's dead. He's not here. He's not here now. And because he's dead, the people who were looking for you, they're all dead also. No, nobody knows who you are. Why? Because you're a different person now. And so your original task will be completed, but you just have to go through this process. Anyway, I have no more battery. So I have to